Do do do, theme song. Do do do, I'm broke so this is my theme song. Do do do, just imagine this is an awesome theme song. Do do, theme song. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box. Bonjour, bienvenue. I'm Sandy. So, today, 1 year ago today, was the day I released my channel trailer for yet another progressive YouTube show, and Left of the Box was officially launched. It has been a wild year. I look back at some of my earlier videos and I'm like, yikes. I feel I have grown more comfortable in front of the camera, that I'm relaying my information far better than I used to. But it has been quite the experience, and there's been highs and lows, and yeah, I'm a bit overwhelmed at times with some of the things that have changed in my life. Some good, some bad, but I think at this point I can say the good has been outweighing the bad. Even though I do get frustrated that my channel isn't growing the way that I kind of hope it has, I am nowhere near ready to give up on this. In fact, I want to go at it even more. I want to do the live streams. I want to have more discussions. I want to get into the routine, because I feel this is the best way I can do my part in helping to get the message out there and change the world. So I thought, what better way to celebrate my 1 year anniversary on Left of the Box than to invite back Dan from the internet and talk about how we both got started, some of the struggles we've been through, some of the positives, the negatives, experiences, and we had a fantastic conversation. We could have kept on talking for hours, but we had to cut it down for time's sake. So please enjoy my discussion with Dan, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter, to hit buttons, there's many of them, to sign up to become a patron if you haven't already, because every little bit helps. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm trying my best to ad-lib this, but you guys know I'm still smoothing that out as I go along. But as much with my first video, eventually I'll get it down too, and I won't be so rambly, which is a good indication to me I need to stop talking now. Okay, enjoy the discussion with Dan. Hello everyone, I would like to welcome back to my show Dan from the internet. I invited him on for my 1 year anniversary show so that we could talk about our experiences online, how we got started on all this internet political, non-political stuff, goals, hopes, futures, that sort of thing. Would you like to reintroduce yourself to people who are still not familiar with you, who are followers of mine that I just gotta say, you guys gotta step it up a bit and go follow him too.
No, absolutely. And I'm so thankful to be on your show again, Sandy. But yeah, I am Dan from the internet. I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Dan from the internet, where historically I've created these very varied length video essays on the alt-right. I guess they became the IDW, broad theories about politics and economics and the collisions between the two, news, all those kinds of heady topics. But more recently, I've been hosting Power Report, which is a more semi-monthly world news and political news show where on the most recent episode, or I guess not the most recent episode because I'm forgetting when these things are being episode, but on a very recent episode, we had Sandy on to discuss Canadian politics and inform and entertain my mostly American audience on Justin Trudeau and some of the ridiculousness going on there. So definitely check that out. But yeah, I've had history working at the Young Turks on different shows on there. I've written for HuffPost and a couple other different places. And so I like politics.
Yeah.
I guess that's a summation of me right there.
So why? Because I find, especially through my channel, there's a lot of people who just simply aren't politically engaged at all. And like for me, part of the reason why I wanted to start my channel was to hopefully get more people engaged, get more people aware of Canadian politics, because one of my things that I quite often say with Americans is that Canadians come across very smug towards you guys because we know more about Americans than Americans know about us. But my biggest frustration is Canadians know more about Americans than they know about Canadians. And so I hope to kind of open their eyes to some things, because we kind of mentioned it on your show about the election. Our election cycles are extremely short compared to yours. And there's some benefits, but then the biggest thing that we miss out on is that means we're not talking about policy or what the parties stand for the rest of the time. Like, it's just those short little windows is when people get their most information about the parties and what they do, and that's usually full of lies. Like, it's usually the parties just flat out lying, but then nobody pays attention later on to see if anything of what they said have been fulfilled or not. So I find if more people in Canada actually knew what was happening here, there'd be, a bigger push for change. So, right, what I was trying to get to was, anyway, with the lack of political engagement and stuff, like most people just aren't interested. What got you interested in politics enough to actually want to get on in front of a screen to talk about it?
Yeah, it was definitely a long process, like a little bit of nature, a little bit of nurture. I can definitely say that my mother actually has like a lot of just interest in politics. I consider her a lot of like an MSNBC liberal, even like to some points today. She supported Bernie Sanders, but I definitely think a lot of that was through my conversations with her. But she's generally has always considered herself to be a liberal progressive in that sense. But to be fair, like for her generation, even cable news is a fairly new advent. So like MSNBC was like the most it got. She sort of is more recently getting into more of the online internet things as well. But that's sort of just what's available for that generation. And so I kind of came into politics from that angle of just kind of consuming the things she did. But of course, like from my perspective, being obviously several generations different from my mother, and experiencing things in different ways, in some ways far more privileged than my mother did when she was a child, in some ways, in different ways, other struggles. And yeah, I sort of very early on began to see how politics is very sort of nebulous thing. And I'm talking early on, like even like age 9 or 10, maybe, could still be relevant to like my life and how things are working in it. Not completely, of course, it's complicated, of course, as everyone's life is, but I was beginning to connect some of the dots, and I began to really, I'm kind of thinking about it in the context of some other work I've done recently, but I think I really got politically engaged around the time of the Occupy protests that were happening in, obviously the big one was happening in Wall Street, or in the area of Wall Street in New York City around Zuccotti Park, but there were different Occupy like protests in different parts of the country in the United States, in other cities around the world even, that were just protesting how in the aftermath of the economic collapse in 2008, where I myself saw a bunch of other, like I saw people's lives change, like my family's lives changed a lot because of that economic collapse. And it seemed like the people who were responsible for that or played a big role in that, the big banks were bailed out first before like the working class, the middle class, et cetera. And so this was this large sort of rebellion that was happening around me. Not necessarily like a rebellion, because you know, we can get into terms and whatnot, but there was a protest I was seeing people activate, and start to speak the language that I was sort of being raised around. And it was basically another kind of moment where more dots were being connected for me, you know? And so, kind of everything happening around Occupy Wall Street and all those different things, it got me into the idea of journalism not just as, well, what do the experts think? What the experts think is important, that provides helpful context, but oftentimes expertise can cloud you from individual people's struggles and personalities. And so a lot of the on the ground interviewing and talking to people about their issues and their struggles, like that to me felt not just like a model for journalism, but a model for politics, where you're just like on as much of a grassroots level as you can, talking to regular people, and obviously not pulling off of anecdotal evidence and trying to seek out a particular worldview, but like going through the nuances of people's stories and realizing that people don't live in just like a black or white, red or blue, left or right kind of space. Like there's a mix of all of these different things, but there's a lot of things that we can be united on. And those things have to do with who has power and who doesn't, who has money and who doesn't. So I think all of those things, my upbringing combining with history and as it was happening in front of me, made me interested in politics and sort of like lean onto it as I had other interests in my life as like a standard American boy would, like in music and sports and cars and things like that too.
And then from there, you decided, well, let's get in front of a camera. And you got on the Young Turks.
Yeah, that's a fast forward. Me getting onto TYT was sort of like a, yeah, in all of that happening. Um, Again, me being an MSN, like my mom being an MSNBC lib, and me kind of having that window into politics. Around Occupy Wall Street, you started seeing radical economic voices peek into MSNBC. One of them being Dylan Ratigan, who I doubt anyone in the audience really remembers, but he used to be a host on CNBC. He was like an economics like reporter, but he would go on these political rants about like the top 1%. Like it almost sound like Bernie Sanders at some point. And so MSNBC was like, whoa, this guy's got some sauce. Let's maybe move him around to some of our political shows. He did some morning shows for a little bit. They eventually gave him an afternoon slot, the Dylan Ratigan show. That was ended right when the markets closed. And this is relevant because Dylan Ratigan would bring on libertarians like Ron Paul and Rand Paul. You would usually never really see talked about or talked on segments of MSNBC or even like CNN or Fox News. And they'd have their wild ideas out there, but they were given a platform. But you'd also see people like Bernie Sanders who were like frequently on there as well, talking things. And then when Dylan Ratigan was out, he would have a wide variety of guest hosts. People who were like progressives. I remember my mom was into talk radio at the time. So you'd have people like Bill Press or Tom Hartman, maybe sometimes making appearances there. But sometimes the guest host would be Cenk Uygur, a man with an unpronounceable name from a really aggressive sounding show that you can only find on YouTube, who would go on these like tears against Democrats who were in ways that Cenk was making really compelling arguments for, oftentimes as corrupt as Republicans could be when it came down to the factors of like why I cared about politics, why Dylan Ratigan did his like angry rants about like wealth and income inequality. The fact that Democrats were talking the talk about it, but not walking the walk when it came to it. And then you just pull up an open secrets like page and you find out where the money is coming from and you can see where that leads to. I mean, fast forward to more recently where you're finding out the influence in the, at least in the United States politics, of the coal industry on Joe Manchin, who happens to be like one of those like leaning votes on getting anything done for the Democrats. You're finding out the real intensity of money in politics. And I think fast forward 10 years, money in politics is a little bit of a semi-reductive view of like fully what's going on in the political system. That's why like with Power Report, I'm trying to take a more leftist, almost traditionally Marxist view of political power, but try to apply that using as little Marxist terminology as possible. We could talk more about that later. But no, I discovered Cenk through, and TYT through those like Dylan Ratigan appearances. And I also I also like after watching him appear on shows like that, I would eventually follow on YouTube. I would see these videos. I'd end up watching the full Young Turk show. I'd find out about like Anna Kasparian, J.R. Jackson, all those other hosts and the perspectives they had. And I started to appreciate that they would start to go in certain places on YouTube in a political way that MSNBC wouldn't, in tough criticisms of the Democratic Party, in looking at not just the Democratic Party, but the Republican Party as well, and kind of more quickly relaying that the Republicans were acting in bad faith sooner than Democrats were on mainstream TV, still acting like, oh, we need to meet across the aisle and talk and have these deals, when it was very clear that, I mean, Mitch McConnell had that quote, our goal is to make Obama a one-term president. We don't want any of this hope and change stuff. Whatever he wants to get done, it can't be done because we want Democrats to be weak. And they've just been repeating this process all the way to this day. And so the fact that TYT was speaking to those things when a lot of mainstream media wasn't resonated a lot with me. And so to speed up the story a lot, I managed to work my way into an affiliate TV network that they were partnering with at the time called Current TV, which happened to be filming in a relative distance to like where I like grew up and went to high school versus where their studio was located at the time. And I found a way to convince Dave Kohler, who was one of the people working there at the time, and one of the people at Current TV, to let me visit once, just like, oh, I'm a fan, I'm a high school student, I just want to like meet Jenk and JR essentially, and see the show like live behind the scenes and like learn it from a journalism perspective kind of thing. And then I sort of talked my way into coming there more, and it became like a, hey, can I do some work around here? And that became an internship, which became a job, which became a producer role, which became almost faster than I was comfortable with being on camera. And that's not their fault. Like they, in many ways, wanted to give me like the opportunity to express my voice and have my voice. I wouldn't say there were like any major moments that came to mind where they're like, no, don't do this, or like, don't express your voice like that. But I had to sort of reconcile my own personality with being an on-camera person. And that wasn't something that I had was like on my own ways, like fully adapted to yet.
Yeah. Well, TYT was actually very formative for me as well to get involved in politics. Because I just remember back during the election that led to Trump, I was watching more political stuff online. And I would often see a lot of clips from TYT and eventually just ended up becoming a member and stuff. And yeah, they really like they struck a chord with me because they were saying a lot of the things. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I get that, I understand that. But then at one point I realized I know way much more about American politics than I do about Canadian politics. And I knew a Canadian election would be coming up shortly, and that's when I decided it's like, I don't just want to be a consumer of this information. I want to do something with it. I want to get involved. I want to help make a difference because I can see the people around me struggling and suffering. And especially people with disabilities, mental health issues, living in poverty. And that never really seems to change. And it started to actually get worse for a lot of people. So I decided to start studying politics. I ended up taking a course online about it to actually learn how the system works. And instead of being bored with the information, I was just finding it so fascinating, like the history and the process and how complicated it is, and learning like, okay, this is going to be really tough to change. Because part of me was wondering, it's like, well, if I want to change the system, I have to know how it works. And it's a complicated system to try to figure out how it works and how best to affect change. And I ended up volunteering on a campaign for a candidate on the provincial level when she was running for re-election. And again, nothing in that process scared me. And it got me more and more interested. And so then when another federal election came up, I decided, yeah, I'm going to try. Like everything I've learned, my background, I'm going to try. And you always hear this from politicians, like it doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter, you know, if you're educated or not. It's your life experiences that you're bringing to the table. I learned very quickly that's just a lot of words. Most politicians do not mean that. It's like, oh, when we were saying anyone should step up, we weren't exactly meaning you. You don't have money. You can't help us. Like, we only want people who can help us to step up. And that first experience that I had with politics was just absolutely crushing in a very personal way, but as well as just learning more about the process and stuff. And when that all finished up, and for a while I was just kind of left wondering, like, I still want to do something. I can't just sit here and do nothing while the world burns, but I don't know how. And it was inspiration through Michael Brooks. I've mentioned this on my show before and stuff, that he really just got me thinking, like, yeah, why am I still here? Like, what else can I do? And that's when I thought, okay, I can start a channel just like so many other people like him. I saw people like you online too. And it's just like, okay, maybe I can do this. Because part of my frustration when I was learning about politics and watching videos online was seeing all these political commentators, vast majority white straight males. And it was just, where are the other voices? And there was one time in particular I was just ready to scream at the camera. It was during the Christine Blasey Ford trials, or when she had to go and speak in front of the House. And there was this one YouTuber, I've heard really good things about him. I heard that he's a really sweet guy. And so I'm not going to mention who he was, but he had a panel of him and like 2 or 3 other men talking about what consent means for women. I'm just like, yeah, no, I can't. There needs to be more variety in there. And I know a lot of women, or people who present as women, they stay away from it because of the harassment and, the extra hurdles that we often have to face. But I'm like, yeah, no, I can take it. I don't mind. I can do that. So I've been online and I've been screaming at certain people ever since. It's like, oh, we need another voice. We need an expert on this. I'm like, I know what I'm talking about. Like, the thing that pisses me off the most right now, I will name them, Lance and David Dole, because they get to go on American shows a lot. They mention CERB, and they mention, oh yeah, all Canadians got it. They just had to call a number, and it was great. It was universal. And it's like, no, it was not. It was means tested. They just didn't bother to test the means before you got it. But then if you didn't qualify for it, you would have to pay it back. And lots of people couldn't qualify for it. People on disability couldn't qualify for it. And it would drive me crazy that, again, there's this maple wash version of Canada that goes out to the rest of the world that we're looking after everyone when we're not. And even people within Canada, that's all they see too. That's all they know, if they're just in their certain bubbles. And if the people in Canada ourselves, if we don't know how bad it is, then how on earth are we going to change it? So that's kind of the short of the process as to why I got on. But when you got started, did it kind of like meet your expectations as to what you would have to do, the process, the struggles, or like, did you kind of think, yeah, I expected this, or was it just totally, kind of feeling like you're left in rough water trying to navigate it?
When I got started, like, with my own show, or
Like actually being a public, like on video, being in public, starting your own show as well, like just the processes, the amount of work that goes into it, that sort of thing. Because I think a lot of people think, oh yeah, you YouTubers, you just sit there and talk. Okay, some do, but a
yeah,
lot of us don't.
Yeah, so this is like, I hope yeah, people should watch this. This is good. Um, so while I was working at TYT, I was figuring out, okay, I like the political aspect of things, but do I want to be the voice? I was perfectly fine being like a producer, and this may have been like in 2013, 2014. No, yeah, 2014, 2015. And I was thinking, okay, what would my political voice look like and be? What do I want that to be on the internet? And I'd already mentioned at the time, like, I had a bunch of other interests as well. I had taken up video editing long before I put like politics and video editing together. I just liked making little short like cartoons and animations. Like I was inspired by Flash comics at the time, like Homestar Runner and stuff like that. And so I was thinking, okay, I would do politics, but with like a visual element that's kind of informative and entertaining. And that's around the time when, Vox explainers were kind of blowing up, but it wasn't like a cynical thing. Like the design wise, they were good. And at that type of Facebookification of media that was happening at the time, it was really good at teaching people topics in a way that TikTok right now is really good at teaching people really deep, heady political topics for the left, right? So I was thinking, okay, this might be my lane where I can differentiate, where I can use my political, like my video editing skills and my political knowledge and meld them together and create this persona and personality. And also I had to like, I and my personality is just not compatible with the general idea of celebrity. It could be a combination of my upbringing. It's just be like, yeah, it's a combination of my upbringing and just my general cynicism. But I like a celebrity can be in the room and I'm not going to treat them much differently than I would any other person if I'm having a good day or a bad day. And that's like my own personality problem. But like and it's sort of like a thing with authority as well. Like I've very rarely just like shown like a deference to authority. And that's, yeah, again, a personality thing that in different ways has gotten me in trouble in life. But it's because of that personality quirk I had to realize very quickly that to some extent I have to create, okay, there's who I am as a person and there's this online persona. There has to be some separation of the two so I don't just go completely insane. But that being said, I want that to be as genuine a manifestation of myself as possible, because you hear horror stories in media of, oh, they're this person everyone likes on camera, but on like off camera, they're a totally different person. They totally flip and they're horrible. Or they're just like not who they really say they are. And I was really grateful at TYT where like, other than the very large obvious examples, the Dave Rubins, the Demi Jors, the et cetera in the world, no one was like that. I'd say 90% to above, everyone on camera is the same way they are off camera at TYT. And that's like a blessing. So I wanted to have that as well. And so through some brainstorming, Dan from the Internet was born, and I started doing my own videos completely unsanctioned by TYT, just like on my own on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Dan from the Internet. It was my first video.
Linked below.
Yes. It was my first video was an explainer on primaries versus caucuses, because I was in college at the time and I worked for like people kind of knew like, oh, he does this like works for this like YouTube political news thing called the Young Turks, which people actually really knew about in college. It was totally weird. Like in high school, people didn't really know about it that much, or people sort of did because generationally people got like my generation, our generation, we get our news from YouTube. So like compared to our parents, that was kind of a new thing. But once you got to college, like yeah, everyone knew about YouTube news and TYT and all that stuff. So that was, I guess, sort of like a clout thing for me in college. But because of that, people were asking me questions about like, okay, the Iowa caucuses are coming up. What is that? Why is that different from where I grew up and where I went to college in California? Why is that different from the California primary, where we pick a day and we go into a place back when we went into polling places and we vote for a candidate, right? How do those work? And so again, I melded my like, cheesy political editing skills with like my desire to make political explainers in 4K with myself in front of the camera. And yeah, like Dan from the Internet was born from there. And I guess it was, to me, to be able to figure out what that persona was kind of the hardest thing, I think. And that's different because, I mean, obviously I'm aware of some relationship to TYT that I had. I'm able to sort of like use that and leverage that to like my advantage as I'm growing. And so that's something that like not every person just starting out is a privilege that they can use and like leverage off of. But it's still kind of hard like on your own. I wasn't like building it with like sanctioned with TYT at the time. So to an extent, no, like if you didn't know I happen to work at TYT, by researching it, I could just be another random, like any person starting the channel on their own. So figuring out my voice, figuring out the actual dynamics of YouTube, that, or Facebook at the time, because I was making videos with Facebook as well, that it's not so much the quality of your video that sells sometimes or like performs well. It's how you can get people to react to it. And sometimes you can get a positive reaction and that boosts your video in the algorithm. I've gotten, those are some of the most fulfilling projects for me. And then sometimes you can get a negative reaction in the algorithm, or a negative reaction from people, and use that to boost your video in the algorithm. And I learned that very quickly and decided, okay, I can use what I know from like TYT and like how to, organize videos to help them in the algorithm, plus what I'm learning of the reaction I can get from these videos. But I tried to find a way to still stick to like what I wanted to do. I didn't want to become like a, not to discredit this kind of creator, because like at the end of the day, you just got to like make your money however you can on this platform. There isn't enough money to go around here as there should be, but concerning the labor that's being done. But I didn't want to lose that sense of who I was, right? It's that difference of celebrity. I wanted to still like stay true to who I was. So I started making videos on like figures in the intellectual dark web at the time. Milo Yiannopoulos was blowing up. Ben Shapiro was just on the cusp of blowing up. So I started to focus a lot of my coverage on him. Plus, he was doing this thing where he was going on college campuses like the one I was attending to do essentially the thing I was doing, which was to stoke a negative reaction in people and use that negative reaction for his own career advantage to boost the algorithm. Because the more people said, oh, Ben Shapiro, you're a bigot, you're racist, you're sexist, or whatever, what you're saying is wrong, the more he would just go on the college campuses, trigger that reaction, and then get those people to comment on his videos, and then boost his own profile to now he's like himself in the Daily Wire, which he founded, and it's his like thing, is the top publisher on Facebook, because Facebook is an outrage-driven platform, essentially. And so realizing that as an early on, I was like, okay, I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to trigger Ben Shapiro fans and use that as a Trojan horse to inform them about leftist politics, explain why Ben Shapiro is wrong, and boost my videos in the algorithm. And it worked really well until Facebook started deprioritizing leftist creators. And then it's still something that works well on YouTube, but I just don't have the energy and time to do it anymore. And because I'm growing to a certain level, I can now balance that with more substantive things that I want to talk about. And so it's, in a long way of answering your question, I've had to ride this balance of the realities of how these platforms work and how you get discovered, while trying to stay like the truest to the message I'm trying to convey, and like who I'm trying to get it out to. It's a delicate, not even a balancing act, it's a juggling act, because you're balancing two things. You're like juggling seven things, and you're constantly having to adapt.
Yeah, I know when I got started, I knew nothing about how to make a video, edit a video. I was very fortunate in that in my planning process of the channel, I had a couple close friends who were very supportive. And it was like even just trying to think of like, what's a catchy name? And I remember I had made a little, when I was looking for a more regular job, I had made a little business card, and on the back of it, I put a logo of like a box with a question mark and a light bulb for representing thinking outside the box. And so one time I was just thinking, like, what do it, like, I could use my name, but my name means nothing. Like, nobody knows who I am. And then it just kind of like clicked in me. It's like, oh, outside the box, but left of it. And so then that's where I kind of got left of the box from, which I guess, unless you see the logo with the light bulb and stuff like that, some people might not kind of clue into what it means, but it still has a certain ring. But luckily with my
I love
friends,
it.
yeah, luckily with my friends, a couple of them do YouTube videos, but for like vastly different categories. And so they could at least tell me some things to start with. One of the guys has a video editing program that he gave me one of the license copies for, so that I could at least do video editing. And again, I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm good in Photoshop, so I understand layers, but that's about it. So I had to learn how to record it, how to get the systems for it, download OBS, how to figure out how to use OBS, get lights and mics. Like, I got a really nice mic. It's not mine. It's on extended loan. Like, anything pricey in the background you see here, I'm dirt broke. Like, it's not from me. Like, even this, I got a nice chair here, a gaming chair, which sometimes if I sit in it, it looks like I have ponytails with red bands in it.
Uh,
And it's like kind of a Star Wars look. I've noticed, and it kind of bugs me, but it was my nephew's. My sister got it for him, and he never used it. So they're like, "Oh, well, you want it?" And it's like, okay, well, it makes me look a little bit more professional online. So it was just this mountain of a learning curve that I had to go through to start. And then it's like, okay, what do I want my videos about and it to be about? And it really was, I had to struggle with, why would anyone care what I have to say? Because I'm a nobody. I'm a broke nobody. I have no clout. I have no credibility, so to say. Like, I have lived experiences with poverty and mental health issues. I knew I was good with comedy. I did a lot of improv. And so I thought, well, if I can make the videos funny, hopefully that will keep people and kind of invested in it. And so it was just kind of figuring out the little tricks and gimmicks that I could use to kind of even play on the fact that I'm dirt broke and stuff. And hence my intro song was born. Because I'm like, I don't have money to pay anyone to make me an intro song, and I don't have the energy to like go to all the free banks of songs and go through them and try to. It's like, no, I'll just make my own. So the amount of work that I had to put into it, and then figuring out, okay, what do I want my videos to be about? And it has changed. There were a couple scripts I was going to do that I just realized, nah, it just doesn't feel right for what I want my channel to be. It's too dark, it's too heavy. Like, if I can't make a single joke in the script, then I probably don't want to do it. So there's even a couple videos that I had up early on that I've kind of unlisted because it's like, it doesn't really fit who I am anymore. And to me, it's always been a process of trying to, how do I express who I am, the best authentic self of who I am on camera? So it's not like I don't have the extra layer of having to pretend and the work that goes into pretending to be somebody I'm not, which I've never been good at in life in general, which has also gotten me in a lot of trouble. But I still struggle with, why would anyone care what I have to say? I'm just this tiny microscopic voice on YouTube. I talk about Canadian politics majority of the time, but that's not the only thing I talk about. And I try to really impress that on people. It's like, well, I will talk about social issues, or a lot of the politics I talk about ties into social issues that can have like cross-border appeal and stuff. But it's like, I have no expertise. I have no background. I have no education in it. So I really still struggle with myself a lot. Like, why would anyone want to or care what I have to say? And so, and I feel it coming up to, well, oh yeah, not coming up to the 1 year anniversary. Today is the 1 year anniversary of my channel. And I haven't broke 1,000 subscribers yet, I think. I don't know. Okay, yeah, this is being recorded a couple weeks ahead of time. And I'm close. I'm close. And but I see other creators, small content creators that are just doing so much better than me, and it's the logic mind versus the emotional mind. I know I'm comparing myself against people who are succeeding because those are the people that I actually see versus all the people who aren't succeeding that I don't see. So it's hard to compare myself against this group of people I can't see versus the group of people I can see who are all doing, 1 year into their process, they were doing far better than me. And yeah, I don't know how to get out there, but everything has just been such a learning curve. Like, I didn't have Twitter before this channel. I barely had a Facebook page. I got the Facebook page when I was trying to get involved in politics. Before that, I didn't even have a Facebook page. So just learning social online etiquettes and stuff like that, like, you were one of the first people on Twitter that I started to follow because I'm like, okay, let's follow these people. And I just went through the list. And then I don't know when it happened, but at some point you followed me back and it's like, oh my God, somebody online that I know has followed me back. Like, this is crazy. Like, you were literally like one of the first kind of famous people to follow me back. Like, even I remember the first kind of politician in Canada that was semi-famous who followed me back. And it's like, wow, this is amazing. And trying to grow my base on there. But then there's all this like, am I allowed to reach out to these people? Like, to ask for help, to do things? Like, what's the etiquette on this? Like, are they constantly being harassed by other people? Am I just going to be lost in the list of messages? And I suspect for a lot of them, I probably am. They probably get tons of notifications. If I send them a message, it just gets lost in the noise. So I still had to struggle with, like, how do I approach this? Because the other thing that I was worried about, actually, when I was like trying to reach out to you initially, was I really appreciate you and like you and love what you do in this opportunity on Twitter where I can actually communicate. So when I reach out, I don't want people to think it's like, well, I'm just trying to use you to get somewhere. And I worry about that, but it's like, how do you start just even a casual conversation like, hey, I love your stuff. But at the same time, yeah, it's just trying, because there's been people I've reached out to that I used to have lots of communication with on Twitter, but then as soon as I kind of said, hey, would you mind looking at my trailer? I hear nothing back from them ever again. So I worry about it. I still worry about it. I don't have nearly as much confidence as I have when I'm kind of in performance mode in front of the camera. Like, I have a lot of self-doubts about this. Like, I imagine that you've probably gone through similar phases of self-doubts and stuff.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, first of all, I'll just say that at one point you will be sort of like, looking at subscriber counts and views and wondering if you'll ever make a difference. And then at another point, you'll be on someone's show talking about or listening to them talk about how starstruck they were when you followed them on Twitter. And then it'll just be a ride for you too, honestly. Because yeah, like even right now, I mean, pretty much there's a way you can look at it where a lot of the people I've worked around like are big names in the leftist YouTube space who, because they got comfortable on camera quicker than I did, let's say, were able to jumpstart their careers to like the places they're at, right? And so I chose a different, more introverted approach, but like it's an approach I'm more comfortable with. I mean, like there's a one angle you could say that, oh, he's just like not as big as those, right? But on the other hand, like like I said, I started Dan from the Internet like while being associated with TYT, but never with the understanding or like thinking that, oh, they're officially backing this or sanctioning this. I've always treated it, and it always has been, its own project, right? And so maybe you can look into, and I'm open to like the fair criticisms of like whatever analysis I have on myself of this, but I think that I always had it in mind that like this was a passion project, right? Only recently did I start looking at Dan from the Internet as like, oh, there are ways to monetize this in the ways that like everyone does monetize it. And it might be helpful to for a bevy of different reasons as like doing it becomes more like, of a process, right? And it grows. Like it's a good thing. But it's definitely, you're constantly having to weigh that back and forth between the performance you see other people are having versus your own like perceived shortcomings. But like truly, I've always just been an advocate of, you don't do this because, I mean, you want to do this because you want to have the biggest audience you can, not because you're looking at the numbers, but because you believe that your message can help people and is important to reach other people so you can educate people and inform them or maybe inspire them to make a difference. At least that's where I'm coming from. The audience is really like not the like end goal. It just like helps get to the real end goal, which is a better place, just society, that kind of like, woo-woo stuff that maybe sort of my more optimistic side, right? But I still do this in the sense that like, this is what I enjoy. I like the fact that I'm talking on November 1st slash like a weekend in the morning where I woke up and this is one of the first things I'm doing, and you're not paying me. I'm not really making money off of this. This is just like I enjoy doing this to a large extent. And so like, if there were luxury space communism and I can just do this without having to worry about, healthcare or rent or even like the cost of maintaining this, like, I have to host a website and a podcast, and that's like an amount of money that I have to spend every month to do it. And so, eventually I have to make that money back or else I just fall into more debt. So like, there's those things to consider as well, but I fundamentally enjoy doing this, and I think it became meaningful for me when I was making the Ben Shapiro videos, like while I was making the primary caucus explainers, and someone commented that I didn't know, that I didn't explicitly share it to, that wasn't one of my friends on the internet, who was like, wow, this taught me something, thank you. And it's like, wow, I helped one person. And to me, that was worth it, regardless of the views, the likes, dislikes on the video. And that particular one was a well-liked video. We go to the Ben Shapiro videos where I purposely made it outrage bait. And so most of those comments were not particularly flattering to me or like constructive to the conversation. And I got a lot of dislikes on that video, but it doesn't matter because that boosted the views. And there are one or two comments on there who like, I started getting to Ben Shapiro fans who had some doubts, but needed someone to trust, needed someone who spoke their language of, okay, here's some evidence, here's some logic, here are these appeals. But someone who gave something to hold on to, because so often Ben Shapiro was using caricatures of the left as easy straw men for him to take down. And so people weren't actually exposed to a lot of proper leftist thinking. And so the 100 hate comments of like, oh, you're this, that, and the other thing because you made an anti-Milo, anti-Trump, anti-Ben Shapiro video, compared to the 3 or 4 comments of like, I used to be a Ben Shapiro fan and this video opened up my eyes, or like, I used to watch PragerU videos all the time, but this video like helped show me the light, and I saw other things and did my own like research and looked at other videos out there, and that made a difference. The fact that I inadvertently inspired other creators, like my Ben Shapiro obsession directly led to like Anna Kasparian and Emma Vigeland and John Idarola talking about Ben Shapiro more, and they with their larger platforms started doing the same thing, where like, yeah, they got a lot of hate views, but they got a lot of people going, oh wow, I guess he is wrong about this thing, or like, this, I guess this isn't. And then like, so I'm saying like, one can aspire to the point where like even in little bits like that, you can hack the discourse in a way that gets you what you want, where you can make a difference and start to turn people's minds and change people's minds, right? But to me, it's worth it even if I do that for one person.
Mm-hmm.
So like, that's just like a place to get to. And one other thing too, I'll just say is that on because your point about like, you know, when you're starting out there, your concerns about networking essentially, because like when you're on LinkedIn and you're just like looking for like a job, it's like, am I reaching out to this person because we were friends in college and like knew each other and like said hi at a couple of parties, or am I reaching out to this person because like I want a job and I'm using them? I don't want to feel like I'm using them, but like I'm kind of like reaching out for work or something like that, to use an example, right? um I think like it's a fine line to walk, because like a lot of people get those things all the time. And I think like any sort of relationship, it builds. Like it's not just the transactional stuff, it's the, hey, we're having interactions on Twitter that, because we're both talking in politics, have nothing to do with our shows, but are things we agree on, or respectful discourse that we can have on things we disagree on. And then that turns into a, hey, let's come on the show and talk about it. Let's X, Y, or Z, because we all have our shows and our bios. We all know what we do. That's what Twitter is about, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a little bit of that, like really fostering a connection, not just like being transactional about it, but also their figures. Like you mentioned me like looking up to me as a figure, and I'm just immensely humbled by that. Whenever you say that, whenever other folks say that, like I only maybe in 2020 or 2021, having done videos since 2014 or so, have I started getting that enough to like not be able to brush it off, and realizing that, okay, wow, even my relatively small audience, I'm making a difference to people, and that powers me to go forward and like hypercharge grow what I'm doing as well. But also it was prodding by folks like Anna and John and Emma and the late Michael Brooks, who like I have like, we chatted one time about this exact thing, and he was encouraging me to do like to use my own voice in that way. And definitely his like sudden passing, that lights a fire into your ass too. But it's part of the way I think I can pay it forward to some extent, is that while I am in this sort of place where I'm not like, I'm mad busy, and I can't do this all the time for everyone. But while I can in some ways help promote leftist creators to help foster this ecosystem where like we can all work on each other's shows and be resources of knowledge for each other's audiences, and help grow each other's audiences in the same way that the right wing has done so helpfully. Not only does that help you, that helps me like in a video creator sense, that helps our audiences, expose them to better information, that helps build a community of people that we can look to, in a community where like in a world where people don't have communities to begin with. If we can build these online, that's a good thing. And I think that's something that on a higher level, hosts like, I'm talking like Cenk, Anna, Michael Brooks, Sam Cedar, we've all had back of the room conversations about like, what does the leftist community look like? What extent can we try to model our behavior in such a way so that you don't get people reacting in politics in a negative vitriolic way as you do see online? Because when you do translate that to politics and you get people who aren't engaged, that's going to disengage them further. They're not going to want to work with a bunch of cranks, with a bunch of assholes, right? It's all about, I see what like I'm doing, not only just like being on your show right now, but like trying to encourage leftist creators to like keep going at it and do that. I'm paying it forward for the leftist creators who did that for me, essentially, in the hopes that you, Sandy, as you grow, start to do the same thing for others who are leftist creators who are just starting out, who end up looking up to you and wanting to do what you do, right? Like, we want to create virtuous cycles on the left, because too often the left tears itself apart. And we can go into a whole separate hour about that too.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah, we as much as possible, I want to create virtuous cycles and encourage and model and show people that that can be a sustainable way forward.
Yeah. It's like, I don't think you really could pick up on how nervous I was the first time I actually talked to you. Because it's like, I was so used to seeing you on screen, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a sec, I say something to him and he's actually responding this time. Like, whoa, it's kind of wild. Like, when I first started to sit, I didn't like this. Like, I didn't like doing this, but to me, the message was more important than my comfort. Like, to just get the message out there. And there has been little moments where it kind of gives me hope that something will happen. And then there's been amazing moments like being able to meet you. Like, under normal circumstances, I don't think this would ever happen. Or, I have had an even smaller content creator, somebody who's thinking, reach out to me. And, I gave him feedback on how I started and how I grew my numbers on Twitter or something. Because I'm more than happy to help support other people just to even get to where I'm at. And then recently, somebody watched, it was a video I did on the $4.4 billion that went missing from the provincial government for COVID relief. And he's like, I'm going to share the out of this all over the place. Because that's one of my frustrations with Canadian news is the stories that are important aren't getting out there. And I constantly, again, have to remind myself, 90% Canadian content from a Canadian, I'm not going to get big numbers. Most of the Canadian content creators that get bigger numbers is because they focus on other things. But I've chosen this route because this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I want to do. This is who I am. So I was able to get through the first hump of just the absolute nightmare of trying to figure out everything. And yeah, there's been little moments, but then this whole process in general, what I've learned about myself over the past year has just kind of blown my mind. Like, just exposed to so many new people and stuff. Like, for me, the two biggest things, I guess, was actually the realization. It's like, oh my God, I'm non-binary. Holy crap. And then I think back to my entire life, and it's like that Twitter meme, say you're non-binary without saying you're non-binary. And that's been my entire life. Like, there's just like this constant like, oh, now that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. But it was because I was being exposed to people actually using those terminologies more on Twitter and stuff that I'm like, huh, maybe I should think about it. But for me, the absolute number one thing was rediscovering my talent for art. Like, that was, for a selfish personal view, if nothing else happens, that would make it worth it. Like, ideally, I want more people to get more involved with politics. And I'm really harsh on Justin Trudeau because I want more people to realize what a two-faced liar he is. Like, it just, I come across so many people, it's like, well, he's done pretty good during all of this. And it's like, name the policy you think he did well on. Well, he got water to some of the indigenous communities. He promised all of them, and now he has another 5-year extension on it. Like, there's not that many of them, considering that, we spent $750 billion on liquidity support for banks. We could do this overnight, but they're choosing not to. But yeah, so there's been a mix of highs and lows for me, but just the moment that I rediscovered my art changed my life forever. Just having that back, because as a kid, having that talent really, it was meditative, it was soothing, it was how I expressed myself. And then the day I thought that I had lost it forever was just so crushing. It was my biggest regret in my entire life. And so Letter Hack just sending out that random tweet saying, can you draw pictures of the Majority Report crew and Sam Cedar? I'm like, I'll give it a try. And what I ended up with was just like, it was almost comical, my reaction to it, because here I am sobbing over this picture of drawing of Sam Cedar. It's just like, this is weird, but my life is being changed in this moment. So there's goods and bads, but I'm hoping, because again, there's just so many times I see people saying, well, we need somebody to comment on this, or who knew that this was a thing? And I'm like, I knew. Yeah, it's just so many ups and downs so far, but at this point, I wouldn't want to give it up for anything. Like, I don't want to I don't want to, I never say right now, I wish I never started this, because there are still just, it's a little gross. And I have mental health issues, so my mind is often in two places at the same time about how negative I am towards myself and how positive I am towards myself. But is there anything like, is there a one moment that is just kind of like above and beyond, like this was so meaningful? Or something that you've learned about yourself, something you've helped change?
Um, I mean, I've had little moments here and there. Like, again, like there's without like reading in like a super over egotistical way, there have been little moments where like I realized my little brain worms slowly made it into political discourse. And like again, I will never get credit for this unless I shout it out myself. So like that's why I feel comfortable saying this on at least that point. But like for a while during the 2020 campaign, I made my Twitter handle Mayor Pete has no black friends. After Pete Buttigieg, who's like currently the U.S. Like transportation secretary, was one of the candidates running for 2020 U.S. presidential election, and basically made up like a plan for Black people and like made up the names of Black people who had signed it and co-signed it, even though like they were called up and it was like, yeah, I've never signed this plan on in his life. Like I've never talked to like I didn't sign off on this plan. I didn't approve it or whatever. I don't know why Pete Buttigieg in his campaign put my name on this. And so it was kind of a class critique. It was kind of a social critique based on Pete Buttigieg and the kind of person I knew he is. But that line, that like refrain, does Mayor Pete have black friends, was repeated in Australian newspapers, in American newspapers and press. Like it became like a refrain, a joke. And it's like, it's like, I can't help but think it's because, I'm followed by media people. And even if they don't interact with like my tweets, the monkey brain is interacting like with the thought and it's slowly making its way through. Like there are moments where I've been able to be proud of like that. Like, when Andrew Neil interviewed Ben Shapiro for his book, the Andrew Neil, the conservative English BBC journalist, interviewed Ben Shapiro and got absolutely like hammered because all of the debate tactics Ben Shapiro uses in America that I'd been calling out for years and thankfully had documented on video with a timestamp of when I uploaded it so I could brag about it endlessly, of like how early I was calling on these things. It happened in real time where sort of before that, Ben Shapiro, this idea of debate me bro culture was at its highest. Like the only way you could settle a political argument was with a YouTube debate. And like Ben Shapiro was unbeatable in debates because he just talked fast and did this Gish Gallop kind of rhetorical strategy where you throw a bunch of nonsense in, and before anyone else can respond to all of your little pieces of nonsense, you're already moved on to your next like attack essentially. But then Andrew Neil just like cleaned his clock using the same strategies I was talking about. And I'm not saying like Andrew Neil was watching my video, but now all of a sudden this like haze over Ben Shapiro was broken because of this interview. And when people were looking to pick up the pieces in the context, like I was there with my talking points on a video that did really well on it, and other people were essentially repeating my talking points that I had been saying for the past 2-3 years on Ben Shapiro, and that got him like where he is today. A lot of conservatives still like love and respect him, but I think that is on a general like downswing overall. His like holdover media discourse is weakening now because of little moments like that. And so it's because very early on, like when I get these sort of obsessions, like there's no return value on them at all, right? Like when I sent that tweet that I have in my bio, how long till Elon Musk gets the guillotine? And then Elon Musk responded, actually. That was just like such a personal nightmare for me. Just because like I got a bunch of messages about it. Like people were concerned, like Elon Musk is a very vindictive person. So people wouldn't know like, oh, would he send his fans after me or any of his like friends if I like anything like that. So like I there are moments where I'm sort of brushing up against these forces and I realize how close I am to pissing off power, and that ultimately makes it worth it because uh, in a long, I guess you could overview look at this thing, is that I've always felt there's been a disconnect with media and people, like the way politics actually looks like when you're um, talking about like your provincial race, where you're actually talking to regular constituents, um, versus what the media talks about, which is this very um, catered sort of picturesque version of things, right? Um, the fact that there's that disconnect and that passionately feel like I understand that disconnect, and that every once in a while I get close to like piercing through and getting like through that, it motivates me to getting to, okay, how much more consistently can I start to pierce through the discourse like this? How much more can I start to like hack it, like actually start to just tip the conversation? And so people start, I'm not give the answers, but so people start asking the questions that make the answers that I've been talking about unavoidably obvious. And so I guess that sort of drives me. That's sort of what I'm trying to move towards. And like that can kind of sound like an evil villain maniacal kind of thing, but it's I hope to again like try to create a media platform where through mediums like this it can still have the benefits of independent media, where um there's accountability between the audience and the presenter and what is being said and spoken about. And so those are the kinds of things that keep me going, knowing that the work pays off. Like I'm not just saying these things like, oh, I tweeted Elon Musk one day and he responded. Like Elon Musk is a special example. He's kind of random on Twitter, random thing. But like I had slight aspirations of being an on-camera person maybe as early as 2012 or 2013. I didn't believe in myself until 2017, 2018, maybe, to even do it. And I didn't start even really seriously doing it until 2019, 2020. But the work pays off because I was doing work on that since I was a kid. Right. And even if you're just starting today, like I'm going to start making a YouTube channel and you realize that, okay, it's very hard and it's difficult and there's a lot to go into it. Yeah, a lot of people realize at that point, okay, it's more than I can handle right now, and they leave. But when you realize that even in little ways, your work is making a difference, like cherish those moments and realize that there's more to come.
Okay, well, I feel like I could talk about this. There's so much more to cover and talk about, but I know you have a time out on this. So why don't we just kind of finish this up by saying, like, what are your goals for the future, like with your channel? And like, what are some of the hopes that you hope to accomplish?
Uh, well, I have, hmm, I have very clear answers on that, but it's all a matter of how much I necessarily want to give away at the same time or not. Um, but I think a lot of what I just said there, you know, as an ends to the means, like again, I don't I love being on camera to the extent that I can relay my message, but only to that extent. If I can like avoid being on camera, then that's something an avenue I will take as well. But my goals in the future involve using this ability to the lengths that I can to, yeah, just change discourse. Maybe if I'm like, I don't want to be the leader, like, oh, everyone pay attention to what Dan's saying because he's right. I mean, smart people in the know might know to do that. And I can appreciate that sentiment. I hope to like, hopefully my predictions, like I can't be perfect 100% of the time. No one really can be, but like, hopefully the predictions that I make on record, I'm making because I feel confident in them based on a bevy of information from my own historical knowledge and what is readily available that I'm also presenting to my audience, right? But I want to kind of be able to take whatever message I have and use that to, like I said, like get brainworms into people more powerful than I am in segments that I'm never going to touch in the world, in like sports and music, etc. And I want to influence them so they influence other people, essentially, right? Like I want to hack discourse in that kind of way. And I found that there are a lot of different ways to do that. And in a vague but specific way, those are my goals in the medium to long term.
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest thing that I'm hoping for is that I could encourage more people to get involved politically. Like start a movement, run for office, learn who your mayor's name is. Like just to get more involved with the process, because I'm under the belief that if more people knew what was happening to the indigenous peoples in their communities, how the government's treating them, if more people knew the dire poverty people on disability are forced to live in, they would care. Like, I think, I truly believe more people would care, but they just don't know about it. And so my hope is just to get more people involved, more people informed, more people running for office, start a movement, anything to, because I know I can't make a difference. I myself personally, I can't change the world. It's about getting enough people together doing their own things that eventually we start getting things in motion. But I know for my channel in particular, I'm hoping to have more discussions because I love discussions. I'm not a debater. I have no interest in debating people, but I love just having discussions. And I'm hoping to eventually start live streaming. Who knows? Maybe I've dated myself with this and I've already started and have booming live streams already by the time this video is up. But I'm nervous about that. I'm dyslexic, and when I get nervous, my speech can get really messed up because it reflects verbally as well as written and stuff of that sort. So sometimes it can sound like I'm almost stuttering because I'm trying to put sentences and words in order. So I'm nervous, but I have no interest in giving up anytime soon. I feel this is the right path for me to help do my part, I guess. So that, and if any future employer Googles my name and finds my channel, I'm not getting any jobs. So I'm kind of limited there. But it has been an absolute pleasure to have you back on my show, to get to know you. You're an inspiration. You really are. And social media has its faults, but it allows people to connect that normally wouldn't have, because you're on the other side of the continent. So, but this has been great. Thank you so much for coming back on my show for my 1-year anniversary featuring Dan.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. And truthfully, you've become like in my repertoire of like international leftist independent news that I consume. You're one of those like channels that I'm watching very much. And so I'm very happy and proud of you. Congratulations on your 1-year anniversary of your channel. And I know that sometimes it's hard, some days, weeks, it's harder than others, but if you're passionate at it, you keep at it. The message that you have will resonate with your audience, and your audience will come through for you. Just like, don't forget about yourself, and most importantly, also to your audience. So yeah, thank you for continuing just to do what you do and being an inspiration to others out there as well.
Great. Thank you. I'm sure I'll talk to you again soon.
Never. Just kidding. had to ruin that moment.
I would just like to add, thank you so much to everyone who has helped me on my journey, who has supported me through this, who has encouraged me. I wouldn't still be here if it wasn't for that. And I appreciate it so much. Even the little things, a positive comment on Twitter, a positive comment on my video, somebody even saying how much they're going to share my video because of how important they feel it is. all of it helps. And I'm still overwhelmed that people care what I have to say. So thank you, everyone. And I hope to continue this journey with all of you. And I hope that our community grows larger. And I hope someday, working together, we can make a difference. So, again, hit buttons, follow, subscribe, all that. Special thank you to my patrons. It means the world to me that you would work me into your budgets, because I know how tough times are for everyone. So, thank you, and let's continue this journey together. Salut, à la prochaine. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandy, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today. I decided I shouldn't name it my 1-year anniversary with Dan.
I, for the sake of my partner and some very, very interesting conversations we might have to have on that day, that would be best.